It's strange how quickly a home can turn into something else. Not with screaming, not with doors slamming or plates shattering, but with quieter things. A sigh too long, a glance that lingers a little too cold. A cot set up in the laundry room with a thin, polite excuse. My name is Marian Ellis. I am 76 years old. I once raised 3 children in this very house, painted their bedrooms myself, patched up skinned knees in this kitchen, and kept every Christmas decoration neatly boxed in the attic. Labeled by year, my husband Walter passed away 5 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. He had hands like work and a heart like spring rain. When he died, something in the house shifted. The silence got deeper, and the walls, once filled with laughter, started to echo differently. Still, I stayed, because this house wasn't just wood and brick. It was memory. It was my place, until it wasn't. It was a late April morning, when everything really began to unravel. My youngest son, Jeremy, called. He and his wife, Jenna, were between homes, selling their condo and waiting on renovations at the new place. Just for a few weeks, Mom, he said. 3 top, their 2 kids would come too. It'll be like old times, he added with a laugh that didn't quite reach his voice. I didn't hesitate. Of course they could stay. Of course they could. I dusted off the guest room, washed the sheets, bought little dinosaur printed towels for the boys, stocked the fridge with the oat milk Jenna liked, even cleared out Walter's old study so they could have a workspace. I wanted them to feel at home. I wanted to feel useful again. They arrived on a Sunday, all smiles and apologies and bags. For the first week it was exactly what I imagined. We had dinners together. The boys played in the backyard with the same rusted tricycle Jeremy once rode. Jenna helped me reorganize the pantry. I told myself this was good, this was healing. But then things began to shift, small things at first. Jenna started leaving passive-aggressive notes on the fridge. Please rinse dishes before placing in sink. Or oat milk is just for the kids. Thanks. I'd laugh them off, though something sharp always lingered behind the smiley faces. Then the guest room became unavailable. I'm so sorry, Mom, Jenna said, arms folded tight. Jeremy's job has him up late on video calls and the boys need their own space or they won't sleep. It's just for a little while. She offered me a cot in the laundry room. I blinked. The laundry room? It's warm, and you'll have privacy, she said brightly. Like that made up for the fact that it was next to the water heater and smelled like bleach. Jeremy didn't even look at me when she said it. He just rubbed the back of his neck and said, It's only temporary, Mom. We'll make it up to you. So I moved into the laundry room. I told myself it was fine. Told myself it was still my house. Still my choice. But something inside me knew better. They brought in new furniture the next day. A sofa I hadn't approved. A giant flat screen mounted on the wall. It's just until we move out, Jeremy said. But when I went to grab my tea mug from the cabinet, I found the shelves rearranged. My things shoved behind protein powders and plastic containers labeled meal prep. Still, I kept quiet. Then came the incident with the port. One afternoon, I stepped out with my knitting to enjoy the breeze. Something I did every day, but Jenna was on the phone. As I sat down in the rocking chair Walter built me, she hissed, Can you give me a minute? It's kind of loud out here. I blinked at her. I'm just sitting. I know, but I'm in a work call. I went back inside. That night, the boys left crumbs and orange soda stains on the rug I had hand-woven with Walter the year before he died. No one cleaned it. No one apologized. Still, I kept quiet. The final straw that week came when I overheard Jenna on the phone. She was talking to her sister. No, it's fine, she said. She mostly keeps to herself. It's like having a quiet little housekeeper in the corner. I sat frozen on the cot, the words ringing in my ears, quiet little housekeeper. In my own home. That night I didn't sleep. The laundry room buzzed with the low hum of the washer. I lay there staring at the ceiling. feeling like a ghost in my own life. At around 2 a.m., I got up and wandered through the dark house. I passed the hallway where my son once begged for 5 more minutes of bedtime stories. The dining room where we once sang happy birthday with cake on our faces. The living room where Walter used to fall asleep, mid-sentence with the TV remote still in hand. It didn't feel like mine anymore. And that's when I knew. This wasn't about a cot and a laundry room. It was about erasure. And I'd been letting it happen, not because I was weak, but because I had believed love was enough. The next morning, I made a decision. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I simply got dressed, put on Walter's old cardigan, and drove to the town courthouse. It took an hour. I walked out with a manila envelope. Inside was the updated deed to the house, placed in a revocable trust under my full control. I added a clause. No alterations, transfers, or occupancy decisions could be made without my express, notarized permission. I drove home in silence. Jeremy was at the kitchen island when I walked in. "Hey, Mom. We were thinking Jenna's sister might come by this weekend. Could you maybe crash with Carol for a few days?" I didn't answer. I placed the envelope gently on the counter, looked him in the eye, and said, "Read this carefully. You'll need to." He stared at it, confused. "What is this?" "Something I should have done a long time ago," I said. And then I walked past him into the backyard. The sun was warm that day, the breeze soft. I sat in Walter's rocking chair and began knitting again, this time not to fill the silence, but to reclaim it. I didn't sleep that first night. It wasn't just the cot, though I wouldn't call it a cot so much as a glorified ironing board with a pillow from the clearance rack. It was the feeling, the sharp edge of humiliation, tucked beneath every blanket fold, the cold ache of invisibility, seeping through the baseboards. The laundry room didn't even have a proper door, just a sliding one that stuck halfway if you tried to shut it too quickly. No lock, no light switch inside, just the flickering bulb overhead that blinked every few minutes like it too was tired of pretending this was a real place for someone to live. A detergent bottle sat above me on a shelf, marked Family Essentials. The irony wasn't lost on me. I laid there, blanket pulled up to my chest, knees aching from how low the cot was to the floor. I listened to the soft hum of the washer, which clicked on randomly even though nothing had been loaded. The machine had more rhythm, more purpose, than how they had treated me. Through the paper-thin wall, I could hear giggles, Sabrina's voice, then Daniel's, something about air fryer recipes, something about what color they'd paint the guest bathroom. Not once did they mention me. Not once did they whisper Mom or ask how I was adjusting. It was as if I had been folded out of the narrative, packed away like seasonal decorations. Around 2 a.m. I finally got up and tiptoed down the hall. I stood outside the kitchen for a moment, hands shaking slightly. Not from fear, but from the realization I was a guest in the home I had bought. The refrigerator light bathed the room in a cold glow. I poured myself some milk, careful not to make a sound, like a child afraid to wake their parents. Except I was the parent, and somehow I had become the afterthought. The next morning, Sabrina chirped into the kitchen with all the brightness of someone who had just finished a workout video. "Morning, Margaret," she said, sliding open the blinds and letting in the sun like it belonged to her. I simply nodded. She looked at me, tilted her head slightly. "Sleep okay?" I looked at her and lied. "Fine," because telling the truth would have made things uncomfortable. And I had learned over time that people like Sabrina avoid discomfort the way children avoid vegetables. They'll walk around it, push it off their plate, pretend it doesn't exist until someone else cleans it up. That afternoon, I asked Daniel if we could talk. We sat on the back patio, the one with the string lights, and the view of the small garden I had helped plant 5 years ago. Most of the herbs had died since then, replaced by artificial turf and stone rabbits from a discount home store. I know space is tight, I began gently. But the laundry room, he sighed before I could finish. Sabrina's parents are staying until their new house is ready. Just a few months, maybe less. I folded my hands. I understand. But I can't live in a room with no windows, Daniel. He looked down. It's temporary. You could have asked me, I said. Talked to me. Made a plan. His jaw clenched. You said you wanted to move in here. We made room. I stared at him. Did you? Or did you just shift me around like furniture you don't know where to place? He didn't respond. Silence is its own answer sometimes. The days that followed felt like a slow erasure. Sabrina began labeling food in the fridge with her initials. Just to stay organized, she said with a smile that didn't reach her eye. The children, my own grandchildren, had been sweet at first. Soft hugs, questions about cookies, about old stories, but now they walked past me quickly, eyes darting like they didn't know what mood I might be in. I wasn't angry. I was disappearing. It was in the small thing. The way no one told me they were going out to dinner until I found a note on the counter. Back late. Order something if you're hungry. The way Sabrina moved my embroidery basket into a storage bin and said, "This will keep the room looking tidy." The way Daniel hesitated before using the word home when talking to me. One evening, I tried to make my old apple crisp. I used to bake it every Sunday when Daniel was little. The smell of cinnamon and butter always made the house feel alive. But halfway through prepping, I realized half the ingredients were gone. My flour had been thrown out, the brown sugar replaced with some trendy organic substitute that tasted like dust. I looked in the spice cabinet. No cinnamon. Sabrina walked in, phone to her ear, AirPods tucked in. She paused. "Oh, we cleared out some old stuff. The labels were faded. Thought it might be expired." I nodded. Of course. Faded labels. That's what I had become. I scraped the half-peeled apples into the trash and went back to the laundry room. Late that night, I pulled a box from beneath my cot. Inside were papers, folders, originals and copies of things most people forget that they've even signed. Deed transfer, tax receipts, property survey maps. I looked over them carefully. Slowly. I had paid off this house in full 5 years ago. After Mark passed, I moved in with Daniel and Sabrina to help with the kids. Gave them the down payment. Paid the contractor directly when they renovated the upstairs. But for tax purposes, just sign here, Mom. Makes things easier. The house had gone into my name alone. It was all still mine. Quietly. Legally. Mine. And I had been sleeping beside a bottle of bleach. The next morning I brewed a strong pot of coffee and sat at the kitchen table before anyone else woke up. I took a blank notepad and wrote 3 lines. Call Carol, make copies. Write letter. I didn't need revenge. I needed recognition. And sometimes the quietest signatures write the loudest chapter. The next few days passed in a strange, muffled blur. I kept mostly to myself, lingering in the corners of my own house, like a tenant trying not to offend the landlord. The laundry room became my universe, and not a single person in that house seemed to think twice about it. Every morning I folded the blanket I'd slept under on the laundry bench, careful not to leave a wrinkle or a trace. I stood at the small utility sink to brush my teeth. I stacked my slippers under the dryer to make sure the hallway stayed clear. I'd always been tidy, but this wasn't cleanliness. This was self-erasure. No one asked if I was comfortable. No one checked in. No one even called me Mom anymore. And the worst part? I didn't think they noticed. The door to the laundry room didn't have a lock, of course. So when I changed clothes, I had to listen with one ear for footsteps in the hall, and rush to pull my shirt down if anyone approached. More than once I woke in the middle of the night to the harsh click of the washer door opening beside me. As Fiona tossed in a load of pajamas or one of the twins' stuffed animals, she never apologized. Not once. She just glanced down at me, eyebrows raised like I was the interruption, then slammed the door shut and walk out again. I started keeping a notebook tucked under the pile of clean towels. I didn't write much, just one line a day. Something to keep me anchored, something to remind myself I was still here. Day 1. The room smells like detergent and disrespect. Day 2. I miss sitting in a chair that was mine. Day 3. I think even the dog forgot who I am. By the 4th day, something inside me shifted. It wasn't anger. Not yet. It was a quiet, aching kind of grief. The kind that comes when you realize you're not just being disrespected. You've been erased. That morning I walked into the kitchen for a cup of tea. Liam was there, hunched over his laptop. He barely looked up. "Oh, hey, Grandma," he said casually, chewing on a granola bar. "Fiona said maybe keep your shoes in the garage instead of the hallway. It looks cluttered." I stopped mid-step. My shoes cluttered. I looked down at the old black flats I'd lined up neatly next to the wall. A single pair not thrown around. Not messy. I'd worn those to Mark's retirement party. I'd worn them to Liam's high school graduation. Now they were an eyesore. I didn't say anything, just nodded and turned to the garage. The concrete was cold and the smell of old paint and fertilizer made my eyes sting. But I placed my shoes carefully on a small wooden shelf and walked back inside. When I passed Fiona in the hallway, she didn't even pause, just handed me a grocery list and said, "If you're going out today, can you pick these up? We're hosting some friends tomorrow." Friends? As if I weren't one of them. As if I were the help. I took the list, folded it in half and tucked it into my cardigan pocket. Then I walked to the backyard. The garden hadn't been tended in weeks. Weeds crawled up around the planter boxes I had built with Mark. The bird bath was filled with leaves and dust. One of the wooden benches had warped from the heat, but the lavender still bloomed. I knelt beside it, running my fingers over the stems. It smelled like memory, like old summers, like my home before it became someone else's convenience. And that's when I knew. I couldn't keep living like a ghost in the house I had poured my soul into. It was time to remember who I was. That evening, when Fiona's friends came over, I stayed quiet. They filled the living room with their polished laughter and wine glasses. They complimented the open-concept kitchen and the clean, neutral palette. One woman leaned over and whispered to another, "It's so modern. You'd never guess an old woman lives here too." They laughed. I sat at the far end of the dining table, sipping tea, smiling like I couldn't hear, but I heard everything, including the moment Fiona said, "We're thinking of redoing the backyard eventually. Probably tear out that weird bench. It's not really our style." That weird bench. Mark built it for me the year I turned 60. He carved our initials into the side when he thought I wasn't looking. He even stained it himself. Though he got half the shade wrong, I never corrected him. I loved that mistake, and now it wasn't their style. I excused myself and went back to the laundry room, sat down on the cold bench and stared at the humming washer. But I didn't cry, not anymore. That night, I opened the drawer where I kept my notebook and wrote 3 words. Get the deed. The next morning, I got dressed early. Before anyone was awake, I wore the soft blue cardigan Mark had given me on our anniversary. It still smelled like cedar and lemon soap. I pulled out a small file folder I had tucked deep in the back of my suitcase. Inside was everything I needed. The original property deed. The transfer documents from after Mark passed. The notarized paperwork confirming I was the sole owner of the house. And then I took a trip downtown. I visited the county clerk's office first. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to make sure every document was still on file. I spoke to a kind woman named Lisa behind the counter. When I handed her the paperwork, she looked it over and gave me a small nod. "You're good," she said. It's all under your name. No co-owners, no liens, no complications. I exhaled. Then I went to a lawyer. Carol had recommended her a few months back. Judith Evans, sharp, calm, and quiet in the way that makes people underestimate her until she starts talking. We sat across from each other in her small office, and I laid the folder down between us. I'd like to draft something, I said. She raised an eyebrow. Something like what? I took a slow breath. I want a living trust drawn up. The house in my name. All control retained, no inheritance assigned, not yet, and I want a clause that says no changes can be made without my explicit, notarized consent. Judith studied me for a moment. Someone trying to push you out? Not yet, I replied, but they already pushed me into a laundry room, and I figure the next move might be worse. She didn't ask more questions, just nodded and got to work. By the end of the day, I had everything I needed in a fresh manila envelope. That night, I returned to the house as dinner was being served. The table was full of noise. Fiona chatting about the PTA, Liam showing the twins something on his phone, pasta dishes being passed around, like nothing in the world had shifted. I placed the envelope on the kitchen counter. No words. No grand announcement. Just a quiet thud of paper on wood. Then I turned, walked down the hall, opened the door to my old bedroom, and walked in. The bed was made. The room smelled like dried lavender and detergent. I opened the window to let the evening breeze in, and I laid down. In my own bed, in my own room, in my own house. No one knocked, no one asked what I was doing. I don't think they even realized what had happened yet, but they would, because tomorrow, I planned to leave that envelope open, and I'd let the truth do what it always does, when it's given air, unfold. I didn't sleep that night. The laundry room had a ceiling light that buzzed faintly, like it couldn't decide if it was broken or just tired. The dryer made soft metallic creaks as it cooled down beside me. I lay on the cot, blanket tucked under my chin, staring up at a ceiling pipe and thinking, this used to be my house. The floor was cold even with the small rug they'd thrown down, the kind with frayed corners and faded flowers. It smelled like detergent and moldy towels, not exactly the scent of home. At some point I must have drifted off, but the kind of sleep you get when you're not wanted isn't restful. It's the sleep of people who keep one eye open, even in their dreams. When morning came, the sound of laughter pulled me out of a restless haze. Not the sweet kind. No. This was the sharp, biting laughter of people who thought they'd won something. I didn't get up right away. I listened. Sabrina's voice floated through the hallway. She actually slept in there. Can you believe that? And Thomas, my own son, chuckled. She didn't complain. Maybe she's finally realizing she needs us more than we need her. I don't know how long I sat there on the cot, my hands folded in my lap, my spine stiff from the cold. But in that moment a slow burn started inside my chest. Not rage, not even sorrow. Something quieter, heavier, like dignity waking up after a long nap. I made myself a cup of tea in the kitchen. No one looked at me. Sabrina and Thomas were at the table with their tablets and phones, scrolling, sipping, existing as though I had simply dissolved into the furniture. I took my tea back to the laundry room and shut the door behind me. That was the second time I shut a door in that house, and this time, I locked it, not to keep them out, but to remind myself I could still choose when to let them in. That afternoon, I opened the cedar chest I'd kept in the garage. Inside were old photo albums, my mother's wedding ring, and a thin manila envelope, marked Profump deed and insurance. I hadn't touched it in years. I didn't take anything out of it that day, just placed it beside me on the cot, like a quiet companion, proof that I still existed in the fabric of that house, even if everyone else seemed to forget. That evening, the house was louder than usual. Dinner smelled like takeout, some kind of Chinese. I wasn't invited. No one knocked, no one offered. I sat on the cot with crackers and peanut butter and told myself I wasn't hungry anyway, but the tears still came, quiet, angry, humiliating. I wiped them away with the sleeve of my sweater, and I promised myself that would be the last time I ever cried in that room. 2 days passed, like fog, gray, slow and damp. They didn't speak to me unless it was to ask if I'd moved something or seen their key. Not once did they mention the laundry room or ask if I was comfortable. I wasn't, but I stopped answering. On the third day, something happened. The washer broke. It flooded halfway through a cycle, leaking soapy water across the tiles. I was on the cot, reading, when I saw it creeping toward me. I jumped up, grabbed towels, and started mopping. Thomas burst in. "What the hell happened?" "It overflowed," I said plainly. "The drum's off balance." He muttered a curse and pushed past me, slipping slightly on the wet floor. He didn't ask if I was all right. He didn't even thank me for trying to clean it up. He just slammed the washer door shut and barked for Sabrina to call the plumber. I finished cleaning in silence. That night, they asked if I could temporarily sleep in the guest bathroom since the laundry room smelled like mildew now. The bathroom, a windowless room with a tub and a toilet. That was the moment I knew something had broken between us. Not suddenly, not loudly, just completely. I stood there, staring at them both, their faces so casual, as if they were talking about moving a chair or switching out a light bulb. "Absolutely not," I said. Sabrina blinked. "Excuse me?" I said. "No, I'm not sleeping in the bathroom." Thomas crossed his arms. "Then where do you want to go?" "The guest room is full of boxes." "My old bedroom," I said simply. He scoffed. "That's where we keep our work equipment now." "I don't care." Silence. Sabrina clicked her tongue. "This is exactly what I was afraid of. That you'd start getting entitled just because you're staying here." I laughed then, a short, dry, bitter thing. "This is my house, Sabrina," I said. "The only thing I've been entitled to is common decency." She stood up. "If this is going to be your attitude, maybe you shouldn't be here at all." And that was it. The last thread snapped. I went back to the laundry room, dried what I could, and pulled out the manila envelope. My hands didn't shake. My breath didn't hitch. I just opened it. Inside was the original deed to the house. My name, Margaret Holloway, etched in black ink. No co-owner. No clause. No mistake. It was mine. Mark and I had bought it in 87. I remembered the first night we moved in. We didn't even have curtains yet. Just blankets over the windows and takeout on the living room floor. We danced, barefoot, between unopened boxes, and laughter. That memory felt like another life, but it was real, and I still had the papers to prove it. The next morning I woke up earlier than usual. I folded the blanket, made the cot neat, and brewed a pot of coffee strong enough to peel paint. Then I sat down at the kitchen table before anyone else came in. I placed the house deed unfolded, unhidden, right in the center. When Sabrina stumbled in, still groggy from sleep, she glanced at the counter and then looked at me. "What's this?" I didn't speak. I just sipped my coffee. She opened it. Her eyes scanned the top lines, and then her entire posture changed. She called for Thomas. He came in, shirt half buttoned, and looked at me. Then the paper. Then her. "What is this supposed to mean?" he asked. "It means you told the woman who owns this house to sleep in the laundry room," I said softly. "And I'm done pretending that's acceptable." "You think you can just—" Sabrina started. "I can do whatever I want," I interrupted. "Because this house is mine. Every room, every corner, every key." Thomas looked pale. "Are you kicking us out?" he asked. I stared at him, long and slow. "No," I said. "I'm giving you a chance to remember who built this home, who paid the mortgage, who raised a boy in these walls and fed a family on tired hands and grocery coupons." He swallowed. "And if you can't do that," I continued, standing now, slow and deliberate, "then yes, I'll do more than leave the deed on the counter." I picked it up, folded it gently, and tucked it back in the envelope. Then I walked to the hall closet, pulled out my old suitcase, and started packing. not because I was running away, but because sometimes the only way to remind people of your value is to remove it completely from the room. The next morning, I woke to the rattle of the washing machine, a low, rhythmic hum that made the walls pulse with vibration. It wasn't even 7 a.m. Someone had tossed in a load of laundry without so much as a knock. No warning. No pause to see if I was asleep. Just the dull thud of a spin cycle and the warm smell of detergent bleeding into the one room I'd been given to exist in. I sat up slowly on the pull-out mattress, my joints aching in ways I couldn't describe to people who had never lived through winters with poor heating and tile floors. My back cracked as I stood. I looked around at the cold tile beneath my feet, the single folding chair stacked with laundry, and the small window above the sink that barely let in the sun. I had lived my whole life with grace, but this was not grace. This was permission-based survival, and I had had enough. I didn't speak that morning. Not at breakfast, not when Olivia asked if I wanted coffee, not even when Ryan waved his phone in my face and said, "Can you take a picture of us before we leave for the conference?" I just nodded, took the photo, and sat at the table like a ghost in a house that no longer remembered my name. Later that afternoon, when the house was quiet, I opened the cabinet where the family kept important documents, still labeled Dad's files, as if Mark would one day return and pick up where he left off. I reached into the back, and there it was. The deed, yellowed at the edges, stapled twice in the top corner. My name, printed clearly beside Mark's, in black ink that still hadn't faded. Full ownership, paid off, transferred. No liens, no debt, no dispute. This house, the very floors they made me sleep on, was mine. I sat at the kitchen table for a long time that afternoon, the deed laid flat in front of me like a silent witness to everything I had endured. I thought of the early mornings when I used to pack Daniel's lunch for school, slipping a note inside just to make him smile. I thought of the days Mark and I spent hand-painting the walls, one brushstroke at a time, saving money by doing it ourselves. I thought of the holiday dinners I cooked alone, even when my knees begged me to sit. I had bled into this home, and now they wanted to wash me out of it, like a stain on the floor. No, not anymore. I went to the small desk in the living room, pulled out a blank piece of paper and started writing. It wasn't angry, it wasn't vindictive, it was simple, measured, legal. A notice of intent to vacate on their end. I wasn't leaving. They were, when Olivia and Ryan returned that evening. They were laughing, some inside joke from the conference. Her high heels clicking across the hardwood, his voice booming in the hallway. I stayed in the kitchen, seated quietly at the table with the envelope beside me. They didn't notice at first. Not until Olivia asked, "What's that?" I didn't answer. She stepped closer. "Grandma." I slid the envelope toward her. She opened it, slowly. Her eyes scanned the page. Ryan leaned over her shoulder. His laughter stopped. "What is this?" he asked, the grin vanishing from his face. "It's a notice," I said softly. 30 days. You'll need to find another place to stay." Olivia blinked. You can't be serious." I turned my eyes to her. "You asked me to sleep in a laundry room, Olivia. In my own house." She stepped back like I had struck her. "We didn't mean it like that." "You meant it exactly like that," I said. "You meant that I was an afterthought, a piece of furniture to be shifted around. You made your comfort a priority and treated mine as disposable." Ryan crossed his arms. "You're blowing this out of proportion." I stood up. Slowly, my voice never raised. "This house has my name on it. Not yours. Not Daniel's. Mine. And I've decided I don't want to live with people who treat me like a burden. 30 days, that's more grace than I was given." They didn't speak. They just stood there, frozen. For the first time in weeks, the silence didn't belong to me. It belonged to them. The next day, I went into town. I bought myself a small orchid from the nursery. A soft pink one in a ceramic pot. It wasn't much, but it was mine. And it reminded me that beauty didn't need permission to bloom. Not even in the smallest, most forgotten spaces. I placed it on the windowsill in the laundry room, not out of acceptance, but as a final act before I took back my space. That evening, Olivia tried to talk to me. She brought me tea, sat on the edge of the washer. "I didn't mean to make you feel like you didn't matter," she said, her eyes glossy. "I was just overwhelmed." I nodded. "I know, overwhelmed," I said gently. "I've lived through it, raised children through it, buried my husband through it, and never once did I take someone's dignity in the process." She looked away, swallowed hard. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I accept your apology," I replied, "but the decision stands." Daniel came home 2 days later. He had been away on a business trip, unaware of the growing storm brewing inside our wall. When Olivia told him I heard the yelling from the porch, he stormed into the laundry room, his face red. "Mom, what are you doing?" I looked at him calmly, what I should have done the moment she gave my room away. He paced. "You can't just evict your own family." "I didn't just evict anyone," I said. "I gave them notice, fair and legal." "This isn't about punishment, Daniel. This is about boundaries. You're choosing a room over your own son?" I stood up. "No. I'm choosing respect over guilt. Something you stopped giving me the moment you let your wife treat me like an inconvenience." He flinched. We stared at each other. Not as mother and son, but as two people finally speaking without the cushion of years and sentiment. "This isn't you," he said. "It's always been me," I replied. "You just stopped listening." The days that followed were awkward, quiet, but this time, not because I was silenced, but because my voice had finally taken up space. They walked on eggshells, not in fear but in recognition. I began sleeping in the guest bedroom again, by my own choosing, while I aired out the master suite and arranged to have the locks changed. I had started calling it the master suite again. It felt right, like a reclamation. I didn't gloat. I didn't celebrate. I didn't shout, "I told you so." I simply moved forward, with a grace they had mistaken for weakness. And every time I walked past the counter and saw the house deed sitting in its folder, I remembered who I was before they reduced me to laundry piles and inconvenience. I was Margaret Hartley, wife of mother of Daniel, owner of this home, and survivor of my own erasure. I don't know how long I stood in front of the fireplace that night, clutching the folder like it was an oxygen mask. My legs ached, my back throbbed, but the heaviness wasn't physical. It was the weight of realization, of decades folded quietly into legal corners and notarized lines, of the truth finally pressed onto paper. When I finally turned off the lamp and headed to the laundry room, I didn't cry, I didn't scream. I just shut the door quietly behind me and lay down on the thin mattress like a soldier preparing for battle. Only this time, I knew which weapons were mine. The next morning, the house smelled like cinnamon and burnt toast. Sabrina must have made something. Not for me, of course. I pulled on my cardigan and moved into the hallway. No one greeted me. As I stepped into the kitchen, I saw the back of Kevin's head at the table. He was scrolling through his phone, earbuds in, a plate of waffles in front of him. Sabrina was at the sink, clinking dishes with more force than necessary. I moved past them, opened the fridge, and grabbed the milk carton. "Good morning," I said, because manners don't rot with age. Kevin didn't look up. Sabrina muttered something that might have been a greeting or a warning. I poured myself a bowl of cereal, sat down quietly, and ate one spoonful at a time, ignoring the tension in the air thick enough to slice with a butter knife. Halfway through my breakfast, Kevin stood, scraped his chair back with a screech, and walked out without a glance. Sabrina turned off the faucet and dried her hands roughly. Then she turned. You really think you're above compromise, don't you? I set my spoon down. I think I've compromised more than you've ever noticed. Her eyes narrowed. You could have come to us like a grown-up at a conversation. But instead, you're sneaking around with lawyers and police stunts. I folded my napkin neatly. Is that what you call protecting myself? A stunt? You're dramatic, Margaret. It's always been about you. I stood slowly, walked over to the counter, looked her in the eye. No, Sabrina. It's always been about survival. You wouldn't know the difference. And then I left the kitchen, my cereal half finished, my dignity not. I spent the afternoon in town, not to escape, but to breathe somewhere my presence wasn't a burden. I walked the aisles of the hardware store, picked out new paint swatches for the bedroom, colors like dusty lilac and morning fog, peaceful shades, quiet strength. I bought myself a pair of soft slippers and a box of chamomile tea. I didn't have to hide. At the post office, I mailed a copy of the deed to a safety deposit box I'd opened the day before, just in case. When I returned home, the house was quieter than usual. No voices, no TV, the kind of quiet that makes you wonder what's been said in your absence. I found Daniel in the garage. He was organizing his tools, something he only did when stressed. He looked up. "Can we talk?" he asked, like a child asking for forgiveness before admitting what he'd broken. We sat on the back porch. The wind rustled the trees gently. The sky was soft with late afternoon light. "I know things are tense," he began. "That's generous," I said. He ran a hand through his hair. "Sabrina's not handling this well. I noticed. But she's not the only one confused. I am too." I looked at him. "Then ask me what you really want to ask." He hesitated. "Then, why now? After everything we've built, why change things?" I took a breath. "Because the things we built weren't made to include me anymore. You're all living in a house you stopped treating like mine. I was just furniture, a placeholder, something in the way." Daniel winced. "It wasn't intentional. Neglect rarely is." We sat there in silence. Then I said it. "I put the house into a living trust. I control it. If I die, it goes where I choose. No automatic inheritance. No assumptions." His jaw clenched. "So what happens to us?" "That depends," I said gently, "on whether you see me as an inconvenience or as your mother." He looked down. "You used to bring me flowers on Mother's Day," I added quietly. "Even when you were in college. Did you forget that version of yourself?" He swallowed. "No, I think I just let other people shape who I became." I nodded. That's what happens when you let convenience replace conviction. That evening, I returned to the laundry room and started packing. I wasn't leaving. I was moving back upstairs. My room. I didn't announce it. I just carried my clothes, 2 hangers at a time, folded the quilt I'd stored in the bottom drawer, dusted off the photo frame with Mark's picture, the one I kept on my nightstand for over 2 decades. I opened the bedroom windows wide, let the stale air drift out and the truth drift in. The next day, something strange happened. Sabrina didn't speak to me at all, but Kevin, he hovered near the hallway as I passed. Then finally said, "Grandma, can I ask you something?" I paused. "Of course." He hesitated, then blurted out, "Why don't you like living down there?" I smiled softly. "Would you want to sleep next to a washing machine?" He looked confused. "But it's just a room." "It's not about the room," I said. "It's about what it means when people stop seeing you as someone who deserves space." He didn't say anything else. But that night he left a mug of tea outside my bedroom door. No note, just the tea, lukewarm by the time I found it. But the warmth was never about the temperature. 2 mornings later I heard voices in the kitchen. Sharp ones. Sabrina and Daniel whisper arguing. The way couples do when they don't want others to hear but still want to win. She's undermining everything. No, she's reclaiming it. I've had it, Daniel. I stayed in my room because I no longer needed to participate in every conversation that included my name. Because sometimes the most powerful response is presence, and sometimes the strongest word is no word at all. But the moment that sealed everything came later that evening. I walked into the living room to find a realtor sitting on the couch, a woman in a blazer and a clipboard. Sabrina stood beside her, arms folded. "We're exploring options," she said coolly. I looked at her, then I looked at the realtor, and then without saying a word, I turned, walked to my room, grabbed the deed copy, and came back. I placed it on the coffee table. "Explore all you like," I said. "But the house isn't on the market. Not now, not ever, not under your names." The realtor's eyes widened slightly. Sabrina went pale, and I walked away, not in anger, in authority, the kind I had earned, and the kind I would never relinquish again. It was Sunday morning when I left the house, quietly, without a word. I didn't slam the door, didn't leave a note, didn't even take the usual route, so the motion light wouldn't click on. I just walked out into the dew-covered morning with my purse over one shoulder and the envelope under one arm. The same envelope I had pulled from the file cabinet 2 nights ago. The one containing the original house deed, the living trust papers, and the notarized addendum, transferring everything back into my full control. The one they didn't even know existed. The streets were empty, the neighborhood still asleep. A few birds chirped, and the breeze carried the faint scent of cut grass and someone's early morning toast. It was strange how peaceful the world felt when your own house had become a battlefield. I walked the 2 blocks to Carol's place, where we had agreed to meet. She opened the door already dressed, holding 2 mugs of hot coffee, as if she knew the weight of what I was carrying went beyond paper. "Ready?" she asked. "As I'll ever be." We drove in silence for the first 10 minutes. I watched the trees go by, trying not to overthink what was coming. But Carol, sharp as ever, didn't let me stay in my head too long. "You sure about this?" she asked, eyes still on the road. I nodded. I gave them every chance. They chose convenience over decency. That house may have 4 bedrooms, but I've never felt smaller in it than I did in that laundry room. Carol didn't say anything else. She didn't need to. By noon we were pulling into the parking lot of the downtown attorney's office. It was closed for regular business, but Judith, my lawyer, had agreed to meet privately. She buzzed us in and led us straight to her corner office, where the light poured in from the tall windows, and every surface smelled like freshly wiped lemon polish. "Margaret," she said warmly, "I see you brought it." I handed her the envelope. She opened it, flipped through the documents, with the precision of someone who knew how these things ended. Slowly at first, and then all at once. "We're ready," she said. "Do you want to send the notice now?" I nodded. She tapped a few keys on her laptop and hit send. That was it. Just like that, it had begun. Back at home, I returned before anyone had noticed I was gone. The children were at their grandparents' house for the day. Sabrina was out running errands, and Thomas, well, he was asleep on the couch, with the TV blaring some rerun he'd watched a dozen times. Not a care in the world. I went straight to the kitchen, pulled out the cleanest envelope I could find, and slipped a single printed page inside. Then I placed it neatly on the counter, right next to the car keys, the half-eaten croissant, and the coupon book no one had touched in 6 months. On the outside, in careful block letters, I wrote, "To whom it may concern," and then I went to my room and waited. They came back late that afternoon. I could hear the click of the front door, the shuffle of shoes, Sabrina's voice talking about how the store didn't even have the right kind of oat milk. Then the silence that followed. When they saw the envelope, I didn't move. I heard it open, heard the papers unfold, heard Sabrina scoff, and then came the voice I had been waiting for. "Is this a joke?" Thomas barked from the hallway. I stayed seated, calm, hands folded in my lap. They stormed into my room. Yes, my room now. Because I had taken back every inch of it. Sabrina was the first to speak. "What the hell is this, Margaret?" Her voice was shaking. Not from fear, from disbelief, from the first taste of losing something they thought was permanently theirs. Thomas held the notice in his hand like it was radioactive. "You're transferring the house out of our reach. What is this trust nonsense?" I tilted my head slightly. "It's not nonsense, it's protection." "For who?" Sabrina snapped. "For me," I said flatly, "and for the home your children think belongs to all of us. Not just the two of you." Sabrina looked like she might explode. "You're overreacting. You're punishing us for asking you to compromise. That's what families do." "You didn't ask," I said. "You decided. You told me to sleep in the laundry room, like I was a pet you didn't want underfoot." "Don't dress it up." Thomas stepped forward, jabbing a finger toward the document. "You can't just change everything behind our backs." I raised my eyebrow. "Can't I?" He paused, then read it again. His face paled slightly when he got to the bottom line. "No party may occupy the premises or make any financial decisions regarding the property without the written consent of Margaret Hartley." Sabrina narrowed her eyes. "This isn't over." "No," I said, standing slowly. "It's just beginning." That night, the house was tense. No shouting. No door slams. Just silence, laced with whispered conversations behind closed doors. I sat outside on the porch with a cup of tea, watching the stars blink into the night sky. And for the first time in weeks, the weight on my chest began to lift. I wasn't afraid of what came next, because whatever it was, I would face it, standing upright, not crouched beside a washing machine. The next day, Carol came by. She brought tomato soup and garlic bread, and one of her old jigsaw puzzles, the 1,000-piece kind she knew I liked because it kept my hands busy and my mind clear. We sat at the table, quietly laying down pieces, when the doorbell rang. It was a courier. He handed me a manila envelope. No return address, just my name typed cleanly on the front. I opened it. Inside was a letter 3 pages long, typed, "From Sabrina's parents." I read it once, then again, and then I handed it to Carol. She read in silence, then looked up and said, "Well, that's rich." The letter was a formal request. They wanted me to reconsider the house. They claimed the situation had been a misunderstanding, that their visit was supposed to be temporary, that I had misread the situation, that they'd been concerned for my health and only wanted me close by. And at the bottom in bold type was a line that made my stomach turn. "Given our ongoing contribution to the household's stability, we believe a co-ownership arrangement is not only reasonable but fair." Fair. I folded the letter neatly and placed it back in the envelope. Then I looked at Carol and said, "Let's go get that notarization." We drove back to Judith's office the next morning. No appointment this time, but she saw me and smiled. "I had a feeling you'd be back," she said. I handed her the envelope. "Add this to the file, and draft a response, please." "What would you like it to say?" I smiled. "That Margaret Hartley has considered their request and respectfully declines permanently." That night, I cooked dinner for myself. Real food, roasted potatoes, baked salmon, steamed green beans with lemon. I set the table for one, and I ate in silence, not the silence of avoidance or tension, but the silence of someone who had nothing to prove anymore, who had drawn the line and dared them to cross it. The letter Judith helped me send was short and firm. No flowery language, no justifications, just a single sentence that spoke louder than every argument that had passed through this house. Margaret Hartley has reviewed the request and respectfully declined. The property remains under her sole authority. No co-ownership shall be granted. Now or in the future. We mailed it certified. I watched the courier scan the envelope and drive off, like he was carrying a message from one world to another. And in a way he was, because I was no longer the woman they thought they could maneuver. I had crossed back into myself, step by step. That night, dinner was quiet. Sabrina and Thomas didn't speak to me. The kids seemed to sense the stillness and whispered through their spaghetti. Afterward, I rinsed my plate and left the others in the sink. I didn't feel obligated to clean up anyone else's mess anymore. Not figuratively, and certainly not literally. I went out to the porch with a blanket, the one with the faded maple leaves stitched in red, and watched the moon climb higher. Sometime around 9, Thomas came out and stood behind me. I didn't turn around. He didn't sit. He cleared his throat like he might speak, then didn't. "You've made your point," he said. I smiled into the dark. "That wasn't my point." "Well," he muttered, "it feels like punishment." I turned, slowly. Punishment is sleeping in a room without windows while your name is still on the mortgage. He winced at that, and I wasn't done. Punishment is being treated like a relic, an obligation, a piece of furniture no one wants to get rid of, but no one wants to care for either. He stuffed his hands in his pockets, the way boys do when they're trying to be men, but don't quite know how. "I didn't mean for it to get like that." "No," I said, "but you let it." The next morning, the real change began. Sabrina came into the kitchen and poured herself coffee. No makeup, no clipped tone, just a woman tired of pretending things were okay. "I talked to my parents," she said. I nodded. "They're upset. Think you're overreacting." "I'm not surprised." She looked at me then. Really looked. "I'm sorry," she said, "for how it all went. I didn't realize how much we were taking from you. Until you said no." That surprised me. Not because I didn't think she could apologize, but because it didn't sound rehearsed. It sounded worn, like something she'd carried around in her throat too long and finally let out. "Thank you," I said, and meant it. The kids were the ones who changed the atmosphere the most. Little Lucy started asking if I'd read her a book before bed again. James, who used to roll his eyes when I asked about school, sat beside me during breakfast and said, "Nana, do you want to help me with my science project?" He didn't ask out of pity. He asked because he remembered. He remembered I used to be more than a shadow in the hallway. Later that week, Carol and I planted herbs in the windowsill boxes again. She handed me a small rosemary seedling and said, "Funny how fast things shift when you remember your name." I smiled. "It's not the name they forgot. It's the weight of it." She nodded. "And you made them feel it again." Sabrina and Thomas didn't move out. Not right away. They stopped treating the house like their domain. Started asking. Started listening. Started walking around like the walls had eyes again. Which of course they did. Mine. I still planned to live alone eventually. I wasn't afraid of solitude anymore. In fact, I craved it. I wanted mornings with soft music and warm slippers. And tea I didn't have to hide. I wanted shelves filled with books no one tried to pack away. I wanted silence that felt earned, not forced. But I would do it on my terms, my timeline. Not because I was pushed, but because I was ready. It was a Saturday when I finally did it. I took a white envelope, clean, crisp, familiar, and placed something inside it. A note, not legal, not dramatic, just a single line written in my favorite blue ink. The house was never just a house. It was a place I built from scratch, with love, with sacrifice, and with fire in my bones. I left it on the kitchen counter, right where they used to leave passive-aggressive post-its for me. I didn't pack a suitcase, just a weekend bag, toothbrush, 2 cardigans, a loaf of banana bread, and a photo of Mark smiling beside the porch swing. I called a car and I left, just for the weekend. At first, I went to a cabin by the lake, quiet, peaceful, mine. And when I sat on the porch, book in my lap, and the wind brushing my cheeks, I realized something simple and true. You don't have to leave forever to take your power back. Sometimes you just have to leave long enough for them to miss the fire they tried to dim. They called that night. Sabrina first, then Thomas. Voicemails. Both of them. Not angry, not defensive, just confused, worried even. I listened, and then I turned off the phone. Not to be cruel, but because I was enjoying the sound of birds over blame, water over words, wind over worn-out apologies. I wasn't vanishing. I was choosing myself. And when I returned 2 days later, the house was cleaner. The guest room, the one that used to be my room, was empty. The laundry room door was closed. And on the kitchen table sat a vase of sunflowers and a new envelope. This one addressed to Mom. For real this time. Inside was a handwritten note. We see it now. The weight, the worth, the woman. Thank you for not disappearing. Even when we tried to erase you. We're learning, slowly, but we're learning. No promises, no perfect ending, just honesty. And maybe that was enough. That night, I walked through the hallway barefoot. I didn't feel like a guest. I didn't feel like a burden. I felt like something they finally remembered. A woman, a mother, a name that didn't belong in small print at the bottom of a family tree, but in bold letters across the deed of a house she built, protected and reclaimed.